Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, you guys, go ahead and mute everybody real quick, and then I'll introduce everything and we'll get started. Okay, so we are actually already live on Facebook and we are recording. So for those of you guys watching from Voices of Strength, we are live with episode 25, and I'm going to give this a couple minutes to get some people on here, and I'm going to ask you guys to go ahead and go into your groups and share this on your timelines as well, and with your friends, invite people in to watch this live with us. And once again, we are on episode 25, and this is a different episode than we've been doing. We have a special episode, and we have Survivor here who's here to tell his story with us, and we have some other guests with us as well. So we'll be right back in just a minute. Go ahead and share this for us and tag your people. So for the people on, we have a few people already joining us. We have impacted families joining us most of the time. Then we also have supporters, and we have new people coming in. So if you are an impacted family, you guys, I asked you guys to go ahead and go in the comments and share your guys' loved one's name. And like I share with every show, this is not just about one of us or the person that's featured this week only, and it's a bigger picture. It's about all of our loved ones and everybody who has been victimized by police. And once again, we are live on Voices of Strength, and we will get started in just a minute, and I will introduce our guests that we have with us today. I'm just sharing this to my personal page and our guests too, you guys. If you guys would like to share from your guys' personal pages as well, I just shared it, and I tagged Roberto on mine as well.
This is real high-tech stuff.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, you guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the show today. And we have some people here too that have never seen the show. So this is Voices of Strength, and we come live every week, and we highlight a victim to police homicide, and we have their loved ones come on and share their stories. I am the host. My name is Marissa Barrera, and I began this show because my brother was murdered by police 4 years ago in Woodland, California. And one of the biggest things, and one of the first things that happens to people when their loved ones are killed by police, just a false narrative, and they lie on our loved ones after they kill them, and they get away with it. So the point of this show is to uplift the loved ones and the impacted family members, and let us tell the true stories about our loved ones. For some, it's a little bit of vindication, and we need to tell the truth about our loved ones. And we also need to let people know, like, it's real, this is happening. So that's why I bring people and let them share their testimony. And this week is a special one. This is the first time we are bringing a survivor. So Roberto, a friend of mine, I'm very, very happy to have him on. And I'm going to actually let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
I know you're familiar with the show, so go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And Marisa asked me to be on this program. And again, if you watch this, it's a little different than what we're going to do this evening. I know in many places we do a land acknowledgement, but I think maybe I can do that personally later for me. But to begin with, I asked my friend, longtime friend, Jerry Theo, to open up with a prayer. Everybody here that's going to speak is a very good friend of mine from way back, and it's special. And again, Jerry is known throughout the country. I can't even say enough. All I could say is that I think his words will speak for themselves. Thank you, Jerry, for opening up.
Mm. Thank you, Alberto, and thank you all of you and whoever's listening out there. Claso Kamatli, Noxtin Makayatzin. I bid you greetings to everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity to share, just to share in this way, and the way that I've been taught. That's helped me, helped many people. Taught by my grandma, my mom, Maria Susolague Ramos from Chihuahua, my dad, Jorge Perez Teo, Tapilanco, Viteca, Nara, San Antonio. But I was raised in Compton, the barrio in Compton. But within all of those times that we saw hurt and misery and struggle and death and all of that, my grandma every morning would begin with a prayer. Every morning at 4:30. I thought it's crazy to get up so early. Why you get up so early, Grandma? Well, she knew there was a sacred time at 4 o'clock when Grandmother Moon and Grandfather Sun came together, that masculine, feminine energy, and she knelt there in that little reconcito, with her candles, her velas, her Virgen, and all of her sacreds, and she knelt down there and she began her reconnection to the sacred again. And what I learned from my grandma is sometimes things are so big, so hurtful, so difficult that you got to reach way deep and reach way down, and you got to reach way back. So with that, I want to just offer, just a few words, and I'm gonna bring this drum in, this drum in this way, and this drum really is symbolic. I say, O Meteoro, Creator, Mother, Father, we thank you for another day of life, another day of breath. Thank you, Creator, for all our relations, right? All that comes and all that goes, and all that's from the past and all that's present and all in the future, true Creator. We give thanks for Tunancima de Tierra, for Mother Earth that way, for Tata Sol, el viento, la agua. We give thanks for that Grandmother Moon and all the animals, the two-legged creepy crawlers, the winged, all our relations, those great grandfather mountains and everything that's in this universe, Creator. We thank you for those things. And we invite everyone just to take a very deep, deep breath that way. Just a deep breath in and release. We know that sacred breath. We're reminded of that breath because many of our relatives' breath has been taken away. But it's that very sacred breath that our mamas, with their drum, with their heartbeat, invited us into this world. Invited us into this world in their stomach, in that womb, in that circle, a sacred circle. And our grandmas, our mamas, held that circle and gave us that drum, their drum beat, the lifeblood that they carry, and waited for our breath. But what we didn't understand is that we were all representations of our ancestors. So I want to acknowledge all of our ancestors, all of your ancestors that way. Any root that you're connected to, the people that you're connected to, and bring them in the circle today, because sometimes we need those ancestors to help us. They too have struggled. They too have died. They too have been tortured. They too have been discriminated. They too have suffered many wounds, and some never healed. Some when they crossed over, they hadn't healed. So you want to invite them in tonight, and maybe in listening to these stories and listening to these messages and being embraced in this circle, that all of us will heal a little bit, including our ancestors, because our ancestors saw a lot that they never talked about. It was too painful to share. But we invite them here because truth really is where transformation and healing begins. And we begin to bring all those ancestors in, Creator, that way. Bring in the voices, bring in the healing, bring in those prayers, bring in that medicine that way. We need all of those things today. And as we recognize this drum, that when we came into the world and all those relatives waited for our first breath, for our first cry, they acknowledged that we were sacred. Everyone is sacred, Creator. And no one deserves to be treated with disrespect, to not be seen, to be tortured, to be hurt in any way, Creator, no matter what they have done in their life, no matter how they've been in their life, no matter where they walked in their life. Everyone deserves the sacredness and deserves that respect, Creator. And so we call on the truth that we speak today and that we talk about. We ask for nothing special other than to be treated as sacred, to be treated as the blessings that our ancestors saw us, to be seen as whole. And if we are wounded, to help us heal, Creator, not to hurt us, not to banish us, not to incarcerate us, but to help us heal, Creator. We all need a little bit of that healing that way. So we call to all that medicine that we have, those songs, those ways, those traditions, those sweat all of those things, those prayers, in whatever way you need it. And we call it to embrace us here tonight. So that as we speak this truth, I want to ask for blessings for all those that are hurting right now, all those that have lost the loved ones. And we pray for those loved ones that went too early, they had so much more to share, so many more things to do, so much more laughter to share, so many more songs to sing, so many dances to dance they never got to do. So we pray for all of them and invite them here. They're still with us. All our loved ones are still with us. They're still present with us, and we will never let them die, because we will still continue to speak that truth. But we pray for those that are here holding their spirits, that are hurting because their spirits are not here. We pray that you help us all heal just a little bit more, Creator. Help us. Thank you for those that create this program, this spoken word, this way of sharing, so that the truth can live and we can all heal. Because the first way we heal is we have to hear truth. We're tired of the lies and the cover-ups of all those things. We ask that you protect those that speak truth, because sometimes the world doesn't want to hear truth. And we ask for prayers for all those that are healing, Brother Enrique and Roberto and Tanya, and Yvette, Jesus, Marisa, all those, everyone that guides this way tonight. And we ask that you help us this way. We come in a good way. We come in a humble way. We thank you. Pray for all our relations that way that need to heal. And we call on the medicine of the ancestral teachings and blessings that we have within us to help us heal. That's what will guide us. We give thanks in the names of all our relations. Ahu, Él es Dios, sometió.
Thank you, Jerry. I invited an elder, Ofelia Esparza. I don't think she's on yet, but if she comes on later, we can get her in there whenever she comes in. She's gonna do a prayer that, like, African Americans, the Black community will recognize that prayer. That is, they call it the conversation, when a father or a mother talk primarily to the son, about the dangers of stepping out of the house. Well, Ofelia, her mother actually, Ofelia is an elder, but her mother did this prayer for her sons. And then when Ofelia came of age and she had her sons, she did the same prayer. So this prayer goes from the 1930s until the 1980s. So if anybody sees her come on, maybe after I finish, and I know Marisol is supposed to be right after me. So if we see her, if not, we're gonna do whatever happens. Like I said, it's a little unusual. When I think of, for me, like, there's no specific prayer that I wanted to do. That is, you're gonna hear Tanya in a bit. You just heard Jerry. We all pray differently, and to me, there's no such thing as a wrong way to pray. If it's in your heart, that's a good thing, And so I think we're gonna begin the part that Marisa had invited me for, as to like how I got into all this stuff. So I think it goes back to Marisa, and then later again, like I said, hopefully Elder Ofelia.
Yes. And Jerry, big thank you to him for doing that. That was beautiful, and we appreciate that. This is new to the show, this, Roberto, but the families, we need this. The families, it's part of the process, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Thank you so much, Jerry.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, guys. So let's get started on your story, Roberto. I know I can't even recall how we met. I know it's been about maybe 3 years. 3 years. Yeah, but so for people watching, I've met him and he's a survivor. He, many years ago, before I was even born, he was brutally assaulted. We became friends. I consider him a friend of mine, a mentor. I look up to you. I appreciate the support you've shown me through this process, through my own trauma and grief and everything. So I'm very happy to have you on here. Like I shared, this is different than any of the ones we've done. We've always highlight homicide victims. I personally often think about how many people are out there that have been assaulted by police. We don't even know those numbers, but I know that even after my brother was killed, people that I knew from the past just confided in me, like that they had been beaten up by police, and it's kind of like a normal thing in some communities. So that's some context for the viewers. Roberto, if you would like to go ahead and start sharing a little bit, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. And one thing I really appreciate and admire about your program here is that, and most of them are family, impacted families. In my case, survivor. I know you call me a warrior too, so thank you. Well, you know, my book, it's called Yolki, right? Anyway, I normally don't, or rather I don't like to share anymore, you know, but you're the exception because like I said, the families I know, you know, when I watch your program, I see them break down, I see them cry. And I'm like, you know, normally I would say that's not a good thing, except in this program, it is, because it's a cleansing, you know, it's something that's bottled up, you know, and it has to come out, you know. I was telling Tanya earlier, and I think yourself, if I cried today, that would be a good thing. Because, yeah, in all those years, I've never cried, you know, I wanted to. And I think I've just been taught to not cry, you know. And it's hard because, you know, we come from a community, from a people that are supposed to be tough, you know, and I think I've battled in the ways that I knew how. And anyway, so that's a long intro to say that thank you for inviting me to be able to share. You know, I did survive. And so I think in a sense, I have a voice that's a little different than most people because, you know, I've won 2 trials, you know, I won a lawsuit trial. I mean, I'm sorry, I won a criminal trial. And then I won a lawsuit trial, 7.5 years apart. And in all the work that I've ever done, research or just reading or, you know, big teacher, whatever, I've never known of anybody to have won and lived. You know, the only people that I know that win usually are dead, you know, like the family, the brother of, the sister of, the parent of, you know, they win in court, but the person, of course, is dead. So for me, to have won the first case, the criminal, that was pretty big. And I fought because I knew where I grew up that that was like, it was like a normal thing. It wasn't unusual. And people brushed it off like, what's the big deal, you know? And I'm like, well, if it's so normal, if it happens so much, then it has to stop. And a lot of the veteranos from where I grew up, they looked at me like, what are you doing? You know, like, you know, we don't do that. We take care of it on the streets or in the prisons or wherever. You don't go to court, you know? But in my mind, I'm like, no, this is wrong. You know, if this is so common, we have to fight back. And I chose to do that. And I know Jerry was from that era, you know, like I met him way back in between my trials. And so I know that they saw me sometimes scared, sometimes, you know, pleading. But basically, I should back up a little bit, right? Because I think some of the viewers probably don't know. I used to work for Lowrider magazine. Before that, I was a writer, but also a teacher. And one summer, they took out summer school, and I had nothing to do for the summer until I went back to teaching in the fall. And so the publishers of Lowrider magazine asked me if I would help them. And they had asked me for about a year, but I really didn't have time. So when this thing opened up, I told them, I go, hey, I think I could help you for the summer. And I did. And it was a radically different experience because coming from the East Side and at the same time, having gone to a university, it's like I was already kind of in a different place, even though I literally grew up on Whittier Boulevard. I think there's only like 2 houses on the boulevard. Mine was one of them in the alley. And so I was familiar with the boulevard since I was a little kid, since 1960. There was cruising, all the time. And but that I didn't really do that. We used to party off the boulevard as opposed to cruising. And so when I got into the magazine, it was like a whole world opened up, and I wasn't really familiar with it, in the sense that, I don't know, it's kind of weird because the cops, they used to see it as like a crime haven, like that's where all the criminals would hang out and kill each other and knife each other, etc. But when I went out there, I saw something very different. I mean, I know that that was out there somewhere, but what I would see primarily was it was like Disneyland. But what I would actually compare it to? More like the Placita, because that's how my parents met in Aguascalientes. They used to, the guys would go in one direction, the girls in the other direction, and that's how they would date and court each other. And in a way, that's what cruising is. That's what I saw on the boulevard. And again, I saw a little bit, and I'm sure it happened somewhere, but on the boulevard, it was mostly romance. That's what I saw, and I just loved it, and again, it was something I grew up with. And I just decided that when it came back to go back to school, I just called them up and said, I'm not going back. I'll come back later, but I'm going to stay with the lowrider. And I did. And a lot of people told me, hey, it's dangerous out there, what they didn't tell me is that it was dangerous because of the cops. They were talking about dangerous like gangs, like, hey, it's, stuff happens, drugs, etc. But I was always okay there, but it was the police stuff that was a little different, And so one night, it was the opening of Boulevard Nights, the movie. And I had actually been writing a piece, an article on police brutality. This was in 78, 79. And so I was going to go up north, actually, to San Jose for that weekend. But because that movie was coming out and the premiere, and all the people were like, the Hollywood people were down the street in Montebello. They opened it up at the Garmar Theater. But I thought either I want to go there or go to the cruising. So I decided to go to the cruising. I went to the cruising. I ran into some kid, well, not a kid, he was probably in his 20s, early 20s probably. And he was talking about God, It was about 10 p.m. And everybody was like, take his picture. And I'm looking at everybody like, take his picture? That guy's crazy, And but when I went into the liquor store and I came back out, the guy looked like Moses, like he had parted the sea, except he had parted the cruising. And I said, hey, that does look like a good photograph. So I got my camera and took photos of the guy, in the middle of the street and all that. One of the things that I had done when I first got there is I saw probably about 100 red and blue lights. In other words, about 100 police cars all up and down the boulevard. And so I already knew there was a lot of cops there. Normally they're not that many out there, but that day or that night, there was a ton of them. Anyway, when I went out there and took photographs of that guy, out of the blue, about, I would say 8 to 10 officers showed up, deputies showed up, and they began to chase him. And they did. They chased him going like towards LA, downtown in that direction. That would be going west. But of course, we're in East LA. If anybody's been to LA recently, where the arch, there's an arch on Whittier Boulevard, it was right there on that corner of Whittier and McDonald. So he was running towards downtown LA in that direction. Anyway, he ran about the equivalent of about 3 stores, maybe 4. But it was weird. Instead of running the way normal people run, he ran backwards. And they caught him. And then they started to beat him, vicious. I mentioned I grew up down the street. And a lot of people knew that I worked for the magazine. So when that happened, and I already had seen all those cops, I just looked at and sized up the situation. I said, I think I gotta leave, And people saw me leaving, and they're like, "Hey, isn't that your job, like to take photos?" And I said, like, yeah, that's my job. I go, but I'm not crazy. I'm not gonna get killed. And so I went to my car. But by the time I got to my car, which is like not far away, like 50 yards maybe. By the time I got to my car, the beating, you know, like, and the shouting about God and all that had stopped. It was like total silence. And the only thing you could hear was the hueco sound of the sticks hitting his body. It was like the weirdest sound I had ever heard. And of course, I just froze in my tracks and I said, I can't leave. So I returned. So yeah, so what, and the fact that I returned is really important, but I didn't understand why it was important until like years later. So what happened is, yeah, I went back, took photographs. I probably took about 4 or 5, I think. And the last photograph I took was one of the cops pointing at me. And then they came after me. And I got hit everywhere, you know, but the worst place, of course, was my forehead. And they fractured my skull. And I ended up I went to 2 hospitals actually. And they couldn't treat me at the first one. I ended up at the second one. And 3 days later, when I tried to get out, they were like, I had been arrested. And I was like, arrested for what? And they like said, for assault with a deadly weapon, 4 counts, and assault and battery on 4 police officers. So it was like a total of 8 counts. And I was like beyond like, this can't be real, you know? And you know, what I've explained right now is super brief, but in effect, that's how this thing happened.
Hey, Roberto, I'm gonna just give a heads up, but I want to share the photos as you're
Sure.
speaking. If so for those watching, he provided some photos, so you guys will get to see. He could explain it as, but I wanted to give everybody the heads up. I'm gonna share my screen here and then get there, but you could go ahead and continue now.
Okay, I just wanted to check the time. Yeah, so a lot of things happened that probably most people could not imagine. Like one thing that I always tell people, number one, I was unconscious. I didn't even know I was unconscious, but I was. And then one of the things that happened after I came to consciousness is there was a cop behind me shouting at me, but I couldn't hear him. That's me as probably about 20 years old or so, UCLA. And that of course is 3 days later, that other picture.
So I just wanted to stop on this one. This is before it happened, right?
Right. Yeah, and yeah, I think what they did to me is like they literally changed my physical structure. You know, like I don't even recognize the other photo. Anyway, so like I said, I was unconscious, and I didn't know I was unconscious until I heard them screaming, but it sounded like mice. You know, like you could barely hear them. And to make a long story short, I mean that has to do with, again, losing consciousness. That goes to the title of my book, Yolki, and I'll explain that later perhaps. But the point is, one of the scariest things, or one of the weirdest things that happened is after when they had me on the ground for like about 10 to 15 minutes, just bleeding, and you know, just bleeding. Then they put me inside the squad car and left, and then they came back in about 10 minutes again later. And right as before the cops came back to the car, a carload of young girls, you know, they were teenagers, they passed me, and I looked at them, and I wanted to tell them, you know, help, you know, call, and I froze, because I was like, normally you're like, help, call the police. And I'm like, wait a minute, these are the police, you know? And now I call that cognitive dissonance, you know, meaning like, and I know I've heard a lot of the family members, you know, both getting harassed in this same situation. Like, wait a minute, these are the people that you're supposed to call for help, not the ones that, so who are you supposed to call, right? So I had that moment, and even to this day, I remember it. And you got to remember, all of this for me took 7.5 years. Radical stuff happened. I had that first trial. Antonio Rodriguez, my attorney, he won the trial. And then I had a lawsuit, and I had another attorney for about 7 years. And 2 days before I went to trial, he dropped the case. And of course, you could imagine. I think most of the family members know exactly what it is to deal with attorneys. Well, imagine that one, right? 2 days before. So I went back to the original attorney. It's a long story, but he took the case and we won. It was like a miracle. We even found a surprise witness in the middle of the trial. It's just amazing, all this drama and all that. I wish that would have been the end of the story. But when, like yourself, Marisa, when you fight for others, and then you hear about other cases and then more cases, it's almost like it never stops, I actually went to therapy after, like, who knows, 30 years, or I don't know how many years, many years later. And I went to therapy, and I think I was fine. And I started running and all this cool stuff. But then when Michael Brown was killed, all of a sudden I went back into the topic because I just started hearing about kind of like this war between white and Black America, And of course, I was very well aware of it, right? But it stayed there, And I was like, wait a minute, it's a little bigger than that, because I remember Ruben Salazar getting killed in 1970. I remember the Wakas. I remember the Watts Rebellion. The Brown Berets, the Black Panthers, they all were fighting against police brutality. So when I was hearing that discussion, it just didn't make sense to me. And that's why I kind of got back into it. And I had to watch over 1,000 videos, of people getting killed in cold blood. And then, as you know, how many got convicted? I think George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, his murderer, is one of the rare exceptions. So that's kind of, as you could imagine, there's tons more. I could answer anything you want me to answer, but I'll stop right there about that.
Okay, you know what? And I just want to, for anyone who may just be hopping in, I just want to highlight that you were brutally assaulted by these officers. And one thing that people often say when someone is even harmed or killed by police, what did they do? So what did you do? You took a picture of them.
Except I was the leader of a gang of 10 to 15 Mexicans.
Yep.
That's what you didn't mention. The arrest, that's what the arrest report said, that I was the leader of 10 to 15 Mexicans.
And you know what? So that's something that people don't realize either, is that a lot of times when people are being arrested for resisting arrest, they'll have resisting arrest as their charges, but sometimes there won't be another charge. So exactly. What were they like? What was the first thing? But then when people look deeper into these, and I know this personally from myself, I know this from people close to me as well, the cops can beat you up and then they'll turn around and say that you attacked them, and then they could charge you. And you went through that. And it's just crazy that you're sharing this story, what happened to you so many years ago, and then it's just still happening. So you took a break. You said you came back when the things with Mike Brown were really popping off. You had to watch a lot of videos. That's hard in itself. That's hard. Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah. Well, I became a member of a group called Survivors of Torture and Political Violence. And I was the only one from the US. Everybody else was from around the world. And I remember in this organization, they have a session just for survivors only, no attorneys, no human rights activists, nobody, just the survivors. And to the last person, everyone cries and cries and cries. And they say the same thing, that the last thing they want to do is fight, but they have to. They have no choice and no option, I learned that from there, and I see that the same thing. I see it with the voices of strength. I see the families, and like, remember the saying that whoever, I forget who said it, but the same idea. We're part of a club nobody wants to be a member of, And that's the reality. That's why it's appreciated when, like, everybody here that's going to speak, you know, that sometimes it's like I know in my book, one of my former students wrote about the concept of, God, I'm forgetting the name now. It's a fancy name about, it's kind of like collateral damage. That is, when those around me were also damaged, you know? So it's
Yeah.
like your brother gets killed, your family, your friends, you know, they get damaged also. And we have a lot of that in our community. And I think that's why we fight, you know, because it's much easier to just go away and never deal with this again. But I've seen more victims than you could ever care to imagine. Well, you have, but I'm saying most people haven't, you know, and it's not good. And that's precisely why we fight, right? Because you don't want to see, you know, I remember seeing meeting a woman that her husband had been. She told me the story, and I thought it had happened that week, you know. And then I asked her, when did it happen? I said, I was signing books for another book I wrote. And she says, and I said, when did it happen? She goes, I don't remember. She asked her daughter, it was like, oh, that was 22 years ago or 24 years ago. And it sounded like it had happened that week. And I was thinking, that's when I came to me, it's like, wow. And you know what she said? That her husband never left his room. They had a two bedroom thing or two floors. He says he never came down again ever, you know? It's like that's how traumatized. And I know the families because I hear them. You fight, you go to city hall, you go to city council, to the police station, and you're getting harassed, you know? That's the reality a lot of people don't know. Yeah. But I like I said, I had told you that I had wanted it to be more prayer than anything, you know, and more ceremony. And I feel that it is, regardless of what we do or don't do or say.
Yeah.
Because I just think what you do is beautiful. All the families, when they speak, you know, I never heard of a family say something wrong, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, how can you, you know? It's like you're breathing the life of the loved one, you know? And I've told you, you know, your footprints, you know, people see the footprints you leave behind.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for sharing all that you have. I think about how long I've been around, which for me, I feel, okay, 4 years. But then I see families that have been here 8 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then you. So I could only imagine how many you've seen and heard of, and just over the years, how hard that is, and just having to fight still.
You know, well, you know, I think we all come from those same communities, and I think we know, and that's why everybody here, you know, has stepped forward, and more so. You know, in a little bit, we're going to talk about the study, the data report that was released last week. And it resonates because we all know this, we've heard this, you know. You know, we're going to hear from my friend Jesus in a little while. We grew up in the same neighborhood, you know, went to the same elementary school, same junior high school. You know, in fact, I know, I don't know if he's going to say it, but he was there when Ruben Salazar was killed, right in the front, Silver Dollar Cafe. I went to the Silver Dollar Cafe after, on television, we heard that he was there and possibly dead. We went there, but then they wouldn't let us any closer, you know?
Wow.
But the point is, this is stuff that if it didn't happen to us, we know about it. And it's not good, it's not healthy. And I think that's why, like, what Jerry does, you know, and I know I didn't give him the proper introduction, but I didn't, you know, there would have been a 10-minute intro, you know. He does the incredible work, the same kind of work you do. You know, he helps heal the young men, you know, often neglected, you know. But everyone here does that, you know, at different levels. And we got together about 50 people and more. We're gonna have more people step forward because it's important and it has to be done because we need our community help. We need a healthy community. You know, I'll stop there because I'm gonna keep running. You know, so I don't know if you have another question.
No, I think that was great. That was great. Does anybody that's on with us as well have any comments or anything to add to what Roberto shared? Especially, I'm hearing longtime friends. I didn't realize you guys have been known each other that long. That's great. I mean, you guys are still.
Yeah,
I think pretty much everyone.
yeah, if I could, I don't think people understand the psychological and spiritual damage. I mean, you can see the wounds heal. I mean, uh, but the attack to the spirit that gets embedded, not only in your body, but in your memory and in your spirit, is long lasting. It doesn't go away. You can I'm a therapist. I know. I mean, you can go to therapy and it's good and you can help heal, but the memory doesn't go away. And once you're reminded of it every time you see something similar with someone else. And so it's an ongoing process that you must endure. It's like a disease that never goes away. You can cope with it, you can get treatment, you can do all of that, but it's there. And so I don't think many people truly grasp unless you've been through it or seen somebody go through it. And I knew Roberto way back then, um, and fortunate enough to be able to support in a lot of different ways. And unfortunately, when you go through that, and not only the victim but the family members also go through the similar trauma because they're connected in that way. So I just wanted to say that much, to really re-emphasize the importance of us addressing this issue, but also us providing support and services for those people that are connected and have been involved.
If I may, also want to commend. I know how difficult it was for Roberto to recount because it all comes back. I got very lucky. I was raised in Huntington Park, just south of East LA proper, and I was raised in a very tough environment between Florencia 13 here, 18th Street, South Side here. You're raised in the middle of the fire. All these things are going on as a youth. But I was, you could say I was a perfect youth. I went to Catholic school. I was like a altar boy. I volunteered for my community. My parents were like activists. My father was a union organizer. So like the what we want our young people to do is to be involved with their community, to do these things. So I did everything in my mind that seemed like, como nos educaron, the way our parents educated us, right? But still, the police harassed me for no reason, no apparent reason. I mean, I wasn't doing anything, and so like, just imagine what Roberto recounts, and he tells a story as needed because all those feelings come back and it's very difficult. But there's no explanation to it. And it's very easy to turn onto yourself. It's very easy for it to consume you. We know, I mean, there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of our youth who, and even here, we know that there's a lot of unidentified killings by the police. There's a bunch of people who it's never reported, and they turned it onto themselves. In other words, they didn't tell anybody, it's not reported anywhere, but what they did is that it consumed them. So although the police may have not shot and killed them right then and there, but they became involved in a kind of a very slow, kind of a slow suicide, but really it's not suicide. It's still the byproduct of the original offense. And so it's very easy for someone like Roberto he could have been in jail right now, could have been, well, really the only choices are, you're in prison, you're homeless, you're addicted to drugs and alcohol or something like that, or you're dead. And so he could very easily been any of those things, but he's not. And he's dedicated his energy and labor into something like this Raza Killings data project. It's not just numbers. Something that we were talking about the other day when we were talking about this is that no matter what, we have to always feature the families. Let the people tell the stories for themselves. So it's not just numbers, and numbers come and go, and we can interpret and talk about the numbers, which is very important. But ultimately, we believe that by allowing people to share their story, it's I guess what you call pedagogy of the witness. There's always the victim and then the victimizer, but then the rest of us are witness. And so by recounting the story, we become witness to what occurred. And so then we have to make the decision. Where do we stand? What are we going to do about it?
I don't see that Marisol is here or our elder Ophelia. So if you want to proceed, Marisa, with perhaps other comments, and then we go to the report, and that would be Jesus and Yvette. I think Yvette could start that, and then Jesus, because Jesus got all the data, but Yvette can give the overall. But what do you want? Any more comments right now, or?
Is there anyone else on here that would like to add anything? Okay, we can move on. Thank you, Enrique, for sharing that as well. Thank you so much. And thank you for being there for him through all this, all you guys. Like, I'm amazed to see this. I didn't quite, as when I was meeting you guys and being in the emails together and our prior, I didn't quite realize like that. And I think it's awesome to see. I'm glad to see that. And again, there are families on here with us. A lot of things you guys are saying, just that we all relate to. We all relate to, and we're all living this every day. So we appreciate this. And let's go ahead and let's move on to the Raza database.
Okay, I'll introduce.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so thank you, Marisa. Part of what I said earlier is that I've been pretty much observing all this violence my entire life. Probably the biggest was the Watts Rebellion, 65, but then the East LA walkouts happened down the street from where I grew up, and of course more of the moratorium where Salazar was killed and 2-3 others. So I've always known about this. And so part of what I said a little while ago is it was not until Michael Brown that people finally start to say, hey, how many people are getting killed? And again, when it became primarily a discussion about that war, that white versus black America type war, I just thought like, no, apparently some people don't know that it's bigger than that. So that's when I began this idea of monitoring and looking at the data, looking at I think it was The Guardian first, then the Washington Post, and on and on. Anyway, so at a certain point, I just decided that we needed to do a systematic research, not just me looking at the Washington Post every day type of thing. So there's a number of ideas and projects all under the idea of La Raza database project. And Yvette heard about what we were doing through my tocayo, the head of the National Chicana and Chicano Studies, Roberto Hernandez, told her about this. And next thing you know, Yvette's with us. And without her, I don't think we could do anything because and I wouldn't say it, but I'll say it. I mean, part of the reason I retired, is I was told by doctors that I would have long-term damage, but it wouldn't happen until much later. And I think it's now, that is memory, things like that. I get disoriented, so to speak. And I just thought that's not a good mix for being in the classroom. So when Yvette came on board, she's pretty much taken on everything. And I think she can explain everything, including the media that's jumped on it, et cetera, et cetera. So Yvette, if you can, in fact, you could even introduce yourself beyond that she is a human rights activist also. So take it away, Yvette.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay? Oh, did you all freeze or did I freeze?
I think you did for a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was
I,
good.
am I good to go?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Marisa. Thank you so much for creating this beautiful space where we can have these conversations with families like you and as a community where we can initiate a different conversation. Um, Dr. Stanley, thank you for the initiative that you've taken to bring us together and start doing this important work. As Dr. Stanley mentioned, I was referred to the team by another fellow activist, Professor Roberto Hernandez, who is a fellow member of a Zapatista network. And at the time, I was putting a global call to action to hold the new administration accountable. And a lot of it had to do with police killings and violations against human rights. So that's what I do. I'm a mental health patient, medical patient, civil and human rights advocate. So a lot of the work that I do with the community is with impacted families. When people don't know where to go anymore, sometimes there's a language barrier to navigate the system, whether it's the legal system, immigration, the medical system, mental health, just benefits. That's where I come in. So when I show up, let's just put it this way, people have to do their job. And I kind of like doing that, policing the police. That's holding them accountable. And now with the work that we have been doing, it's for one, it's a lot of validation about things that we've known, things that we've suspected for a long time. It comes with a lot of pain, a lot of frustration to see that our people are getting killed. Something that I started saying in this conversation, también nos están matando. This is our issue too. And I will be forever grateful to the Black Lives Matter movement who initiated this process and helped us kind of find our voice and say, this is happening to us too. And that's how we came together. That's what we've come together from all backgrounds and walks of life. And, guerreros, guerreras like yourself, Marisa, and Dr. Cindy and Enrique, and just, all of us here to shine a little bit of light on these lives that more often than not go forgotten. That I just look at numbers, like numbers, like they don't have any human value. They, as if they're not worth of justice. And that's something that we've discovered in the data. A lot of these deaths are reported as unidentified, other, or unknown. So it's really not robbing only people from their human life. It's also the dignity. They're not worth a name. They're not worth being identified. So it's really painful. It's really sad. But I'm glad that it's being done by the community for the community, and because it's time for us to kind of find the answers to these problems and stop relying that the government or officials will get it done for us. It's unfortunate that we have to be here and do this kind of work, but I'm also glad to see that we're coming together and doing this. So if you have any specific questions, just please, maybe I'll do a little bit better answering questions. But yeah, so far what we've found in the research is really alarming, and maybe Jesus can explain a little bit more about the actual findings and the numbers in these people's lives. You're muted, Dr. Sinley. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I was saying is that like before I introduce Jesus, I wanted to say something regarding what you just finished saying. That is the concept of desaparecidos. You know, because I was thinking as you were speaking, like how do you disappear a name? You know, how do you kill somebody and not know who they are? And we're talking thousands, right? In what we did, it's 6,000 people. That's not credible. And yet here we have 6,000 people without names. That's the definition of desaparecidos, you know? So anyway, so yeah, so the work that we did uh, was predicated on that idea of what I said earlier, that I was looking at the data from the Guardian, the Washington Post, killedbypolice.net, and a couple of others. And I stumbled one day onto the unknown category, and I saw a lot of Garcias, Lopez's, Sanchez, and thought like, how did they get into that category? You know, unknown. I go, Sanchez sounds to me like with this society, I mean, to me, I would call them brown, native, indigenous. Society calls them Hispanic, Latino. So I said, okay, well, how come they're not in that category, you know? So then I said, well, something's fishy here. So I said, I'm gonna check the other categories. And then I went to the white category and another Sanchez, Lopez, Garcia, you know, a bunch there also. So when I started talking to Jesus, you know, a while back, I told him that. I said, like, you know, there's something wrong here. You know, the data shows a lot of Raza being killed, but there's probably a lot more because there's all these unknowns. And then on top of that, I think Yvette alluded to that we didn't even have any information for them at all. That is not even unknown, not even anything. Just it says police information withheld by police, you know? So that's when we called Jesus, you know, who I, again, know, aside from going to the same elementary and junior high school, Eastmont, that I know him from Washington, D.C. also in his work with the Census Bureau. So anyway, contacted Jesus and he did probably what all the other databases have not been able to do. And I think it's so impressive that we have gotten more response than I've ever seen. We can explain, talk about the media later. But I think if now Jesus can talk about what he's done and what still needs to be done. So Jesus, if you can say a few words.
Thank you, Roberto. And I really appreciate what you're doing here. When Roberto approached me, it was just, in my opinion, just to have another conversation about, you know, many conversations Roberto have had over many years. Working at the Census Bureau, I was very protective of my fellow bureaucrats, and because they're also very smart. And Roberto mentioned again that am I echoing? Sorry. So Roberto mentioned that we we knew each other from East LA. What I didn't say is that prior to that, I came from Aliso Village in Boyle Heights. And talk about seeing violence firsthand. I remember walking to school and seeing the chalk marks, you know, from a death the night before. That's pretty hard stuff for a 5-year-old. So one thing I learned early on was geography. Living in Aliso Village, you knew not to cross this line because this gang was there. You knew not to go there because this other gang was there. That interest in geography has carried me forward. You know, you develop a situational awareness of where you are, your surroundings, what threats there might exist, what opportunities there might exist. This has become my profession now. I carry that forward from UCLA, where Roberto and I were working, I went to graduate school, UCLA, architecture and urban planning under the great mentor Leo Strada. Went to work at Washington, D.C. Headquarters in a population division. And for several years, I was the official government spokesperson on the U.S. Hispanic population. I was the go-to person, Washington Times, New York Post, and on and on. I say that because in reading one of the recent reports, and I hope I'm rambling a little bit here, but I want to give it a context. We were referred to this group as volunteer researchers and community activists. Okay. Well, Roberto is a professor emeritus, and I was the official spokesperson for the federal government on this population. So somehow you got turned into the premier expert or voice of the government to a generic, volunteer researcher. At the same time, one of these articles was touting these other databases, as the official reference sources. Well, as a trained demographer statistician, the first thing we do when we look at data is we try to parse it out. Somebody comes to me with a set of data, I don't accept it at face value. And so not only did Roberto provide me the Washington Post, New York Times, Fatal Encounters, and others, but I went in and started delving into my community of GIS computer mapping people, and I found additional resources. So over the past 2 months or so, I have been compiling, merging, patching, unduplicating all of the different data sets, 4, 5, or 6 at one time. And the initial report that I put in the chat for Unidos, I was a little concerned that the numbers might be, they're under or over reported. But after a thorough review of my process, my new results are basically 150 or so off. So the count, or what we call a universe, of 32,000 and change deaths since 2002 remains pretty much the same. What I am doing now is marshaling the resources and knowledge that I have to fill in the gaps on things like causes of death, dates of death, were they brandishing a weapon, all these other criteria, with the goal of being able to create summary reports, tables, and then interactive mapping where people can go in and look at where these occurrences are happening, what's the ratio to the population. I live in Kern County. We're under a decree from the state attorney because, as the Guardian noted, Kern County sheriffs and Kern County police have the highest proportional kill rates in the nation based on population. So as far as the numbers are concerned, I believe what we are creating here is as good as a data set can be. And it's an improvement, or not an improvement, wrong word. It's an enhancement to the other resources, the other databases, because now I have brought in the pictures from one, the news stories from another, the website from another, which were in different places. I am compiling them now into one. that people can go back in and look at, try to research a story, try to research an individual. And now that I have everything together, we can begin now to look at the unknown category. I'm looking at my numbers just right now that I generated, and there's still close to 1,500 unknowns. Are they errors in my data, or are they, you know, other things? There's still much more work to be done here, but as far as I can tell from compared to others, what we are doing here with Roberto and Yvette guiding us is as good or better than just about any other place. And I want to make sure that, you know, I am doing the best I can, but I can tell that we are doing as good a job as anybody else without this thing being an official US government run operation and with all the resources of that. So, you know, I posted the link to the NIDO site on the chat. You know, I'm not going to go into any specifics at this time, but I'd welcome any questions you have. Oh, and one thing, yes, I was at Ruben Salazar's killing. I was at St. Alfonso Pool with my brother. I heard the commotion. We ran. I ran right smack between the Silver Dollar Saloon and LA County Sheriffs with their helmets pointing guns at me as I ran to the middle. So I'm never going to forget that either. I'm welcome to any questions, but you know, I'm very thankful to be a part of this project.
Well, you know what I can do is let me give a little summary of a few things, and then hopefully we get questions. But after the questions, I hope this is okay with the format with Marisa, but we do have Marisol in the waiting room.
Okay.
And she works really hard on, you know, East LA. You know, I don't think it's a coincidence, but a few of us here are from East LA. You know, and Marisol's going to talk about that in a little bit, okay? Because, you know, one of the things that I suspected when I was doing this research is as much research as I've done since 79 and that knowledge of Salazar getting killed in 70, I, like most people, thought all the violence was taking place east of the Mississippi, you know, because I would hear, you know, I would listen to the media, Chicago, St. Louis, Cleveland, New York, New Jersey, you know, Miami, and on and on. And then when I started looking, you know, the Washington Post has a feature about states, you know, and all of a sudden you look at states and California, literal killing fields. There's no state even close to California. And just, I mean, I would say the entire state, but it does happen that Southern California, like LA Sheriffs and LAPD, even more so, you know. But you also have, like Jesus mentioned, Kern County, you have Phoenix, you have Albuquerque. I've heard all these different places where everybody says we're the highest. And I'm thinking, well, maybe not the highest, but they're very close. In other words, there's a lot of killings going on everywhere, you know? Now think about it. Number one state is California. Number two is Texas. And this is before the new data that Jesus has come up with. So it might change a little bit, but I still believe it'll be the California, Texas, Florida's 3, and then between the greater Southwest and the deep South, you know, those regions are the ones with the highest. But California and Texas, again, through the roof. Okay. So now, again, so what I knew are those same streets from Southern California. Through the magazine, I actually knew pretty much the country. But as I mentioned, so right now, Yvette just spoke and Jesus just spoke. If anybody has a question about anything related to what they've presented, there's a ton of stuff. And that's why the media is, I mean, totally all over the place about this, because they've never heard this before. When Michael Brown was killed to the present, I think the count is somewhere around 2,600, But again, Jesus has come up with more. So I expect the final report for all these numbers to go even higher. Okay. But again, think about what Yvette was talking about. You know, these literally are desaparecidos. And so what we're doing is we're making them, we're giving them that dignity of finding those names. You know, that's the minimum we could do, but there'll be more. And like I said, there's so much to talk about. So maybe we should see if we have questions from anybody, either the rest of the panel or Yvette, I think has something to say.
I just want to add, you know, the number that we continue to come back to, the 32,000 people who have been killed since 2000, 21 years, over 32,000 reported deaths from the police department. This is 32,000 impacted families. This is 32,000 families who have been changed forever. 32,000 families who have survived the terror, the harassment, the intimidation, the trauma, the pain. So it is important that we come together as a community to have these conversations and heal. It is painful, it is messy, but it's necessary that we learn about this. And like I said, this is not a black issue or white issue. This is everyone's issue. This fight is literally for life, for everyone's life. And, you know, when we talk about percentages, and this is something Dr. Sinley continues to say, just because we are like 18% of the population and we're getting killed at like matching rate, it doesn't justify one death is one too many. And we're talking of thousands of families. So just, I would like to encourage the families to continue to tell their stories, tell their truth, and to not believe the narrative that the media and the police try to push. You are your voice. You are your this is your truth. This is your story. And we're here to uplift you, support you, and make sure that you're not fighting alone. And to the families who speak Spanish, a las familias que solamente hablan español, por favor, no tengan miedo de contar su historia, no tengan miedo de contar su verdad. La comunidad está aquí para ustedes, no están solos en su lucha y por favor, alcen la voz, porque esta lucha es de todos.
You know, I find it interesting that even the popular media, they don't identify our community, and so it's very common that maybe, and to the credit of the Black Lives Movement, that immediately when there's an African American who's assaulted or killed, it makes the news that evening, and we hear about it somewhere in the United States. But they identify it, so we know. So in our minds, we know, oh, it was another Black boy, or whatever. Sometimes we just hear the name and we already like jump to it. Oh, but even when the media reports, and I think I heard this the other day, I think one of you all brought this up, that when CNN was reporting on Adam Toledo, he was just referred to as a 13-year-old boy, or anyways, he wasn't identified. There was no, anything, Latino, Mexican American, Hispanic, anything. It's just a 13-year-old boy or boy, or however they had said it. So we don't even, we're not even on the radar in terms of the media. And I think what this Voices of Strength project is doing is powerful, because we're taking the message directly to the people. And so I want to make a plea to anybody who's on this Facebook Live and anybody who's watching this on the post-production YouTube version of the video. I want you to make sure that you share it and you send it to all your contacts, because quite honestly, we can't depend on we have our media partners and we're very grateful, but we have to take our message directly to the people. We can't really depend on that. And I had a conversation today with somebody from CNN, and I told them that, and so they're going to look into it, and supposedly they're going to discuss it next week in their board meeting. I find it that talking about the desaparecidos, not even in the popular media, our community's not even identified. So we're never going to win the battle of we're not even in anyone's consciousness. It's not even on the radar of anybody to think that our community is as well the recipient of brutality and harassment and killings.
Enrique, this is approaching the issue of identification was my call to action from Roberto. And so what I did is I brought together the different databases that you mentioned, and I took as face value the identification on those databases of race ethnicity. And so many of them do it in different ways. So I ran a set of tables from there. But then I brought my knowledge and understanding of what's called a surveying database of the Census Bureau that contains 151,000 variations of names. And I applied that to all of the names. So I took the names of individuals and I basically parsed them out. And then I applied different methodologies to come up with Spanish surname. So I think part of the issue, and so from that, the counts now were initially at like 5,000 or so. The newest count that I just came up with was 7,800. And that's just based on the use of this new methodology, applying existing data sources from the census. I think something we're not discussing here is this has not been a focus of research by the government or by institutions. And so because of that, because it isn't considered, like you say, a priority, the resources to analyze this have not been included. I've been in this business for 30 years. This has been my career. The technology and the people who do this sort of work is out there. It's getting easier. It's just hasn't been applied. And so again, I know Roberto from many years. Fortunate that I have, a skill set that can assist. But I'm getting back to the point that this topic as a research item could have been done years ago. It just isn't. I'm more than happy to move it forward. I'm happy this is now occurring. I think that's another sign of us not being a priority because we haven't been a priority in the research at the highest levels on this particular topic.
Before I introduce Marisol, there is a question. Marisa, I think you have it.
Hi, yes, actually, we have a question from someone in the comments that I wanted to direct about the database. Miss Grant, she's asking, do you think the media owners suppressed the data prior to this?
The databases, as I've looked at them, are a product of volunteers or individuals that have taken this as their task. The Fatal Encounters database, I was looking at it and it looks like it is a former journalist that has taken this on, as one of his goals. So it's not that they have neglected it. It's just that, again, it isn't institutionalized from a research or a data collection process. So I am very thankful for what is there because it shows on this case a lot of dedication by volunteers to see this up to this topic. So no, there's no conspiracies. There's no, hiding of data. It just hasn't been the priority that I think it could be, and maybe going forward it will be.
I want to go to Marisol, but I noticed that Yvette, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to respond real quick to that question about the media, because that's a question that I've had for a long time. Do the mainstream media cover up the truth? What is the process making, the decision making to decide what goes to the public and what they edit out of the videos or what they show the community, right? And I had a very interesting conversation with a friend who I had to admit, like, I have no idea what that process looks like. That's why I'm always talking crap, because I ignore what happens on the other side. And he shared they do have a process, that about the information. For example, bad words and certain things that need to be omitted from the public. However, I think a lot of times, there's certain networks that I do not want to mention to not give them any more credit or platform, who tend to lean right wing, and they just go with what the police say. So it's that idea that if the police is saying this, if they're reporting this, it must be true. Not uh, did I did I freeze? Am I frozen?
Mm, somewhat, yeah.
Is it better now? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Oh dear God. Okay. So just to wrap it up, a lot of times they just go with what the police say as if it's the only truth and the absolute truth, and nothing else matters. When we know the police lie all the time, a lot of times they literally just copy and paste the reports. So for one, it is that the police are not doing a good job at reporting the truth and putting the real facts of what happens in these interactions. But I also want to highlight that the police have a lot of mental health issues themselves. So it's that that relationship with the media and the police that needs to be separated, and do not believe what the police say all the time. So yes, that was just that question about the media.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to introduce Marisol. She comes from a long tradition of fighters, and she can introduce her own organizations. The one I want to mention, because I have a little knowledge about that, is that, God, must have been 40 some years ago, I met a man named Tony Rios, and he knew what I was living through. And he told me about a story about CSO, who are the people who trained Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, about how in the 1950s that the CSO took on the battle called Bloody Christmas. And if you've ever seen the movie LA Confidential, that's Bloody Christmas, the opening scene. Anyway, that's one of the organizations that Marisol is part of. And it's exact opposite of what people say. CSO, as an example, has been fighting police abuse forever. Some of the stories keep saying, well, if you guys fought, maybe people would pay attention. That's false. We do fight. We've always fought. So Marisol, take it away. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Profe. And thank you everyone for being on here. And my apologies for just now joining the conversation. But exactly how Roberto said, community service organization, CSO, Centro CSO as we go by now. Yes, it's been doing a lot of work since the 50s, right? We were formed in 1947, but since Bloody Christmas, we've really taken on the torch of trying to fight back against Raza killings or our own killings, right? And I mean, the whole thing of why Bloody Christmas was so significant was because there were major concessions won, right? Like there were lots of police officers who were actually indicted. And for Raza to have these officers in the jail when they got drunk and beat up a bunch of Chicanos, like that was unheard of, right? Like we're talking like the 50s. We're talking about a long, long time ago, right? And so, as you all know, like today is actually the anniversary of the Zoot Suit uprisings or riots, as people want to say, hoy mismo, right? Today. And so, like our history goes back to the 30s, right? Like our oppression, the racism against our people is so extensive, and not only from soldiers like on the anniversary today, but also police officers killing us. I think that La Raza database is so significant for this, to try to, keep track of all of these killings. As Roberto said, in Los Angeles or California, we lead the country in our killings, Bakersfield, for example. And I know that I use the homicide report that the LA Times uses all the time, right? I'm always checking it out. It's updated a cada ratito whenever they kill someone. And so that's not really that specific either, though. The information, as y'all were mentioning, as Yvette was just saying, it's the narrative of the police officers and what they publicly release. Yeah, this is, it's super inaccurate. Just as an example, with Jesse Romero, 14-year-old who was killed in 2016, when he was killed, the police said that it was a grown Hispanic male, is what they said. He was 14 years old. How do you mistake a 14-year-old for a grown man, right? It's obviously, it was on purpose, right? It was intentional to try to scare people and say, oh my God, there was this grown man running around during rush hour in Boyle Heights, right on Cesar Chavez, which is such a busy street. And so, it's amazing that something like this happened. The Washington Post picked it up, as you all know. People are sharing it back with me, telling me, have you heard of this Raza database? And here we are talking about it, right? These are the folks who made it happen. So I'm really proud to be here. But it also puts kind of like, for us as people who are leading or helping lead the fight against our killings and to try to bring justice, it's also for our purposes, right? It's for our resources. Because I can't be going back and forth to the LA Times homicide report, y'all. Like, that's, ahí no se puede organizar in that manner, right? And so I think it's really great that we have a database. And I would actually say that racism has a lot to do with the fact that, a lot of people are kind of not sure about how to go about when it comes to our killings. If it's someone who's Black, like it's become such a norm to fight back, right? If someone who is Black or African American is killed, it's like, you got to stand up and fight back against that injustice. And that's great. That's a great thing. We should be uniting with our African American sisters and brothers, right? But when it comes to us, people get kind of concerned. They're like, well, did they have papers? Were they American? Like all these like awful things that are, again, embedded in racism, right? It's how it's always been for us. Si tienen un apellido that's en español from Spain or whatever, they get kind of concerned. They get kind of like, well, should I fight back for this person? Like, they probably don't even speak English, right? Like, it's horrible. It's racist. And so I'm so glad that I'm here united with a lot of you who understand and have, dealt with it so much. And we just got to keep it moving, right? Let's keep it moving. Thank you, everyone.
I know we're gonna have I don't know if I'm off. Am I off? No, I'm not off. Yeah, I don't know when we're gonna do the Q&A, but I know Enrique is gonna make an announcement right now. And then Tanya needs at least 7 minutes, maybe even a couple more. She's gonna end with a guided meditation. I'll explain more in a second, but I don't know if you want to say a little bit more, Marisol, because as I tell everybody, LA sheriffs and LAPD, it's like they kill as much as entire countries, So I don't know if you might want to highlight one more case before we get to the announcement.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, I always say, like, all roads lead back to Aztlan or where the Chicanos are, right? And for us in Los Angeles, it always leads back over here, y'all. Like, I live in Boyle Heights, y siempre pasa aquí la cosa, right? So LAPD trains officers in Chicago who then train officers in Palestine, right? Like the paramilitary, I'm gonna call them, who are killing Palestinians. It's like, it's always interconnected, right? And where are these folks coming from? Like the guy, I forget his name, Mike Fuhrer. I always forget how to say his last name. I can't say German last names, y'all. But that guy, right? The guy who did the Rodney King beating. I'm sure y'all have seen the like mockumentary. And so that guy is actually running for office in Florida. He retired and went to Florida, and he's not gone. Like that guy is running for office, like a white supremacist LAPD officer who beat Rodney King. He's running for office, right, in Florida. So like, we have to remember that, like, despite what people might think about LAPD and LA Sheriff's Department, they're really, really strong, and they're really united against our killings, right? And not only that, but they're harassing people. Just recently, there was a really widely shared basically release of information that was done by the ACLU. And it was on families, two particular families in East Los Angeles, the family of Paul Rea and the family of Anthony Daniel Vargas. And both families are notoriously known here locally and now around the country as the families who not only had their sons killed by LA sheriffs, East LA Sheriff Station, but they're also now, after his killing, getting harassed for fighting back. So what does that mean? They get pulled over unnecessarily. It just happened a few weeks ago. We actually had to do a rapid response to the family of the Vargases because they were sitting outside of their house and they got pulled over. They actually got pretty frisked and even beaten up. And so, you know, when you're fighting back against your family who just got attacked and killed, like they continue, right? They're not done terrorizing you, is what I'm trying to say. And so that's awful. And we have to understand that there's a long history around this too. The Chicano moratorium in 1970, there were 3 killings. And they were at the hands of the LAPD and the East LA sheriffs, right? Of the people who were there to control the crowd, right? And so after that happened, they were very proud of the job well done. And I'm saying that sarcastically, of course. They made a little logo that it's like a boot and there's a helmet and there's 3 and the 3 represents the people that they killed. I don't know if y'all have seen this, but it's in the front door of the East LA Sheriff Station. It just came back from the dead. Like this logo had actually been banned by that other guy, McDonald, Sheriff, LASD Sheriff McDonald. It came back under Alex Villanueva, who's now the current sheriff of the LA Sheriff's Department. He brought it back. You know, they're really proud of this logo. And it's in the front of their entrance. And if you look up Alex Villanueva, you can find him standing in front of his desk where there's an actual little like miniature, what do they call it? Like trophy of this exact symbol. So like they're very proud of their oppression of Chicanos, our oppression, and it dates way back even to, you know, 1970. So there it is. Yeah. And the Banditos. So Yvette is holding up the Banditos. It's a known gang within the East LA Sheriff's Department. So they have gangs. They have their own way of getting initiated to kill us. And so I'm glad that we're highlighting these things. These are all like brand new things that are being released to the media, but we're organizing around that. And actually locally here on June 27th, we're actually going to do a memorial event for Paul Rea. So you're all invited to protest the East LA sheriffs, and we're helping put on that action. And thank you again, everyone, for letting me blab on about the work that we do in East LA against the sheriffs and the LA.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask Marisa actually a question, but right before that, a quick response to you, Marisol. And that is, you know, East LA has always had the biggest gang, even before the Banditos. You know what they're called? SEB, Special Enforcement Bureau. You know, they have, it's like a SWAT. That is, they run free. They've never been convicted of anything, and on and on and on. So sometimes we think about the, you know, because they tattoo the gang thing, right? But by itself, their very existence is paramilitary, you know? Anyway, so I wanted, before Enrique makes that announcement, and then we go to Tanya, I did want to ask Marisa a question, and let's see, I hope Marisa is there somewhere.
I'm here.
Yeah, so Marisa, look, I remember when I asked and we talked about this, you know, it's almost like, what is a prayer? You know, what is a ceremony? You know, because we're not really praying the way people pray, right? Like we're not in a church or anything. And I'm thinking about what you do and the families, you know? And I know that I think each and every one of us, you know, when I asked everybody, they were like beyond excited to be able to do this, you know, especially Tanya, who will close it out in a second, you know. And I wanted to ask you if we did good, you know, because you know, we don't mean to like take the voices from the families, you know, even though we are some of the families, right? In one manner or another. So I just wanted to see if maybe you had a comment, you know, on this, Marisa.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely happy to have you guys here and share. And like I said, for me, I often think about, you know, the way that my brother was murdered, but I often think about the people who survived those attacks, and I feel it's important to share those stories too. And with everybody here, you know, we appreciate that, even the families, people that are not impacted, you guys out here doing the work. I want to share why I want to be a part of the Raza so that families watching, the families, there's families watching week after week. And then I did also want to share that we did highlight Anthony Vargas a few weeks ago. His aunts were here on the show with us, and we've been tight with that. I've been tight with that family since it happened. So, yeah, thank you for mentioning them too and being there, Marisol. But so for me, being a part of the database, I'm already doing a lot of stuff, you know, with Voices of Strength. I've done different things over the years. My brother, it's been 4 years, and created Voices of Strength to give the families a space, because we don't make it to media, and we don't make it unless you get, you know, your case gets national news. And if I'm just gonna share from families' perspectives, you could be white, brown, black, even a black person. If they get killed, it doesn't mean because they're black that they will get attention. And I'm just sharing these because there are families here watching, and so there have been people killed by police that are black, and they still won't get attention if the media and people are not giving that person attention. So that's one thing I did want to say that on here, is I heard someone else say something, and I do want to share. For me, it's about Yvette, and you shared this also, humanity at this point. But for me, being a part of the Raza database is so important. Being a young woman in this, I have had a lot of hard struggles trying to just speak up for my brother, trying to be that voice, and people telling us telling me not to speak because we're not black and are to speak. So I'm like, wait, my brother was really murdered by police. It's my time to speak anytime I want to speak. So, and I do that. And these other families that are watching do that. So for me, it's speaking out to my people too, because at home, when this happened to me, my family, like when this happened to me and my family and my brother, even our own family, they don't support, and they're not showing up at our events and things like that. So it's also for me to speak out, and people that look like me can see, hey, no, this is really happening. And just because they don't see it on national news and things like that, and just because they don't see us yet, doesn't mean we're not here. So I just wanted to share that for the people watching, and the other families, that Voice of Strength, we're taking this all the way, and it's for all the families, all the families, no matter what race, no matter what background. And that's where I've stood since when my brother was killed, and I realized how large this issue is. I stood there from, I'll never speak and not talk about the other families and the other victims. So I just wanted to share that. But I think it's great we came on and did this. We're speaking to our people, but we're also making the stats, that the truth that is already there, just making it more aware and trying to get more attention for this. And I appreciate all you guys that are on here and that want to support Voice of Strength even further. And it's been a long ride, but we definitely need the help. And that's why this was created, so the families can sit here and share, just like Roberto shared with us, you know, more details about how he was assaulted. We let the families do that every week. So that's all from me. And thank you all for being here again.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you just gave a prayer, you know, in a way we all did. So Enrique, I've known him also for a generation, and in talking to him, you know, and I've been to his conferences. In talking to him, he mentioned the idea of doing a national, I think we had already talked about having a national summit. We hadn't chosen a date, and he came up with this idea. So I'll let him explain it, and then we'll go to Tanya after that, okay?
Thank you. So there's a lot of organizing taking place at the local level, but very little where all of us, except for this, in this case, where we're talking to each other. And there's different stakeholders. There's, of course, the families. Then we have the grassroots organizers. We have the academic and the researchers. We have the counselors, the psychologists, the people doing that work. We also have the police, right? The allies in the police force. We have the government officials. I mean, there's a lot of people that need to come together. And so normally we don't talk to each other. And so we need to force a conversation where we can get everybody who should be in the room to come together. Now, right now, because of the COVID environment, we don't know how soon we will be able to repopulate. For example, my campus, I'm at California State University, San Bernardino. So we may be able to have a national forum where there's maybe some of the key people are there in person, but we've learned, and well, not just we, because we've been doing it for a long time in the LEAD program, but everyone else has learned how to Zoom, how to join in virtual. So we need to take advantage of that. Everybody knows how to go on Zoom, so we can hold a virtual, part of it virtual, hybrid, and part of it in person with whoever needs to be in person, to have this conversation. I mean, there's more unanswered questions than what we have to share with each other. Nevertheless, we need to have this courageous conversation, and we need to especially get our government folks involved, because if you notice, a lot of them are very silent. A lot of them come forth when they need to, and many have come forth with the Black Lives Matter, but just as many have been silent, you can say, I would argue, when it comes to this particular issue. This report's already been out a week, and I haven't received anything from any government official wanting to talk or anything like that. So I can just imagine. Long story short, one thing that we know how to do is that we as Raza, we pay homage and tribute to our lost ones. So what better than Dia de los Muertos in order to tie in this theme? So our idea would be to propose that for Dia de los Muertos 2021, that we create not just a national forum, which would be like a conference, right? But we need to create some movimiento on the ground level. So what if we were to ask every Calpuli, every Mecha, every nonprofit community-based organization, every church, if need be, every whatever, so that as they're having their Dia de los Muertos, their Day of the Dead event, that they integrate this thematic. What better? We just think that it's an opportunity lost if we don't do the effort so that everyone during this Day of the Dead that we remembered, of course, all our loved ones and everyone who's passed on, but we need to pay special attention to these folks, because in our belief system, if we don't remember them, then they've died once again, right? So we are guilty of also killing off the memory if we don't do the effort to make sure the memory of their lives, and if we do it with dignity, right? We have to do it in a dignified way and with the ultimate respect. So perhaps if we can get permission from some of the families, we can have some pictures, we can also work with our school districts to create curricula around Day of the Dead, lesson plans that bring in a very age appropriate way to discuss this issue with school age children. If they're not getting the conversation from their parents, then we have to be the parents, and we have to create the conversation in order to advise our youth as they're growing up. And so anyways, there's the idea. it's just in proposal format right now. We're still talking about it, but we want all our listeners and viewers right now to set aside Monday and Tuesday, November 1st and 2nd, and we're going to come back to you with more details. But that's the idea.
Yeah. And I think everyone who's heard the idea likes it a lot for the main reason, we thought that if we do just a regular conference, we'll be invisibilized once again. This way we can honor all deaths, don't matter the race or the color, and it would be impossible to invisibilize us with Dia de los Muertos, So I think it's a chance of, especially what Marisa just said, this is for the families, So like any family, all families can be honored, And not only that, what we were all thinking about has already happened. That is, we have changed the conversation. We've seen it, the Washington Post, CNN, Democracy Now. It's nonstop, and that's good, but it's not gonna stop there. That's why the work that Jesus continues to do. Plus, he had assistance from about 8 or 10 researchers, if I'm not mistaken. But so we're gonna continue, okay? So what I wanted to do right before Tanya comes on, I want, our elder Ophelia, who's actually a master, what do you call it, altar maker. She was unable to be here, but she's gonna do that for us too. But let me read the prayer that her mother wrote. So this is from the 1930s, and it's bilingual, and then we'll go to Tanya. Virgen de Guadalupe, te encomiendo a mi hijo, protégelo contra las policías y contra los quien andan buscando a quien golpear. Hijo, ten cuidado, no les des la cara, ni lo mires ojo a ojo a ningún policía. Si te llaman o te preguntan, no contestes fuertemente y siempre obedécelos. Cuídate, mi hijo, Señor. Okay, so then she would give the sign of the cross to them. So the translation is this: Virgen de Guadalupe, I leave my son in your hands. Protect him from the police and from those who are always looking for someone to beat on. My son, be careful. Do not look at the police. Do not ever look them in the eye. If they call out to you or if they question you, do not respond to them forcefully. Always obey them. Dear God, please take care of my son. Imagine that, 1930s, and then Ophelia herself, when she had children, continued it up until about the 1980s, if I remember correctly. So that was beyond inspirational for me to know that, that's called the conversation in the Black community, it's kind of scary, the idea that you have to tell, the kid, don't look at them, and then they harass you for not looking at them. But anyway, so now.
Can I say one thing, Roberto? If there's anybody out there who wants to volunteer labor, be part of this, please contact Roberto, Yvette, me, Jesus, any one of us on here. Please contact. We need teachers who are willing to put together lesson plans. We need people who are willing to, what if we were to create labels of the prayer and put them on candles and give them out? What if we do our own mass marketing in order to get the word out? So that if anybody, please don't, just because you see us here working on this, that doesn't mean that, it's too much for us. It's too overwhelming for us. And we're going to burn ourselves out doing this work. We've been doing it for a long time. We need other people. So if there's a cadre of young people or anybody who wants to donate resources, donate labor, please contact us.
Oh yeah, no, we're going to do all of that outreach. We even have a legal division, possibly international criminal court. But again, there's a lot more. But now I want to introduce my friend Tanya, very special in my life, because when I met her, at a certain point, she invited me to guided yoga. It was at a Pueblo Senior Center. And I went thinking I was going to go around stretching my body, And instead, it was what I thought was guided meditation. And I remember, because of this topic, I get ultra tense. And I remember after she finished, I was like as calm as I can be. And I said, hey, I got a book coming out. Would you consider doing what you just did for my book? And she said, absolutely. So she's done what she's going to do right now for not only us that have been speaking, but for the audience. And again, somebody very special. Can't say enough about her. And so I think if Tanya, if you're ready. Maybe she left. Tanya?
She's in here still.
Yeah.
She's
Well,
muted.
she's kind of like, oh yeah.
Yes, hello?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, perfect. No, thank you so much, Roberto. It's an honor to be able to contribute any little bit of spirit. Again, this is my little heart kind of passion. Growing up being Native, Mexicana, growing up here in the United States has been very hard for myself and my whole family and just family and friends, which the subject is very touchy. A lot of sweating, a lot of shaking, a lot of crying, which is beautiful because it's all healing and it's creating space for beautiful new blessings to come. So what personally, this has been the only thing that has helped me in my life to evolve, grow spiritually, and be able to help others, along with my healing and my yoga teaching and experience just being a Native and Mexican in this country. So thank you so much again. It's an honor. And I'm very, very blessed and grateful to be here again. Okay. So enough said. Thank you for joining me again. And if you guys could sit up straight, ground all feet on the floor, chest hard out, roll shoulders back down, and head skull up. Be ready to receive all the beautiful messages coming our way. And then hands heart center, and close your eyes. Inhale fully, exhale completely. Next exhale, join me with an Om, AUM, sets a healing vibrational frequency, and as a union becomes more powerful. Inhale fully. Om. I would love to welcome you into this healing space, this space of light that you guys can come back to at any given time. It is in this darkness that we see the light. It is in this light that we feel the warmth. The anger, transform that into passion, love, and power. Power to summon that Yolki spiritual warrior we all have within us to help us battle and fight in this life, in this reality, in this now. Not with war, but with love, respect, and kindness. Inhale fully. Exhale completely. And just take a little bit of a time and moment to connect with yourself, to connect with that breathing. Take advantage of this healing space, of this sacred space, to remove any trauma, any bad habits, any memories, any thoughts that no longer serve us, that we no longer need. To create space for new beginnings, new blessings, and new life. Not just for ourselves, but to those around us that we love. It is here. We plant that seed. It is here where you are blessed. It is here where you are protected. Inhale fully. Exhale completely. Remember that with each exhale you take, you're elevating your mind, you're elevating your soul, and you're elevating your spirit. Inhale fully. Exhale completely. Now, if you could please join me to help close the circle as a union with an Om. Inhale fully. Om. With much gratitude and respect, namaste. Mil gracias. Thank you guys for joining me. And that's it. Thank you. You guys
Yes,
have concerns or
yeah.
anything?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. That was after a tense, 2 hours, or if it's an hour, like, wow, I feel very calm. And I think probably most everybody else does too. I wanted to say something about a word that you said, which is kind of my word too. That is Yolki. Yolki is the title of my book. And I didn't explain what that is, and I'll be very brief. But I found it in a codex while I was doing my book on Maiz. It spoke about warriors that lived in the spirit world, but that they would be summoned to fight in this world. And the long story of this, but I make it short, is that I realized that when I went unconscious, on March 23rd, close to midnight, that I actually did die. And I came back, but I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, somebody has to summon me back. And I'm like, well, I summoned myself back. So a lot of times that's how I feel. Like, it's came back to battle, and that's what we're all doing. That's why, and when I heard Tanya speak about this, because I've seen her speak in public before, and I said she explains the concept of Yolki better than I do. So that's also why I thank Tanya for what you've done before and today especially. And also thank you, Marisa. I don't know if we have one last minute or two or whatever, but of course, you're the one supposed to close it up anyway. So you might want to say some last words, Marisa.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That felt really nice that we do these shows. This is number 25. And honestly, after I did lose my brother and I'm impacted, doing these shows, it's heavy. And every day after a show, I have to take the whole next day to unwind kind of to stay away from social media. So this was nice to end it. I appreciate that. But everybody on here, appreciate you guys being on and being a part of the project. It's big. I think it's gonna get bigger, and we need all the support we can get. I see some people in the comments offering that want to help, so we'll get back to everybody who leaves something in there. And I also see families that are leaving comments and good positive feedback. So appreciate everybody being here today. If you have anything else, Roberto.
Well, just one last thing is that, the project has a lot of components. I mentioned the legal one, but the other one that's kind of exciting, especially for youngsters, is that we're gonna be releasing a CD for November 1 and November 2. And some of you know Yaut from formerly Aslan Underground. I think it's called Anahuac Underground now. I'm not positive, but he's compiling, and I think he's gonna do what we're all doing. He's converting the data, the stories, the narrative, and the testimonials into a CD. So I think he might be calling on perhaps yourself also, Marisa, and a few other families. And so, because, one of the things we were saying is that when we put out the report, and it's already had that effect, but when it comes out, the final report, that we'll probably get as much, as much play with the CD as we do with the actual report. It'll bounce off each other, So I think it's exciting that, and we're gonna have, again, different kinds of musicians, hip hops, spoken word, and on and on. So that's the last thing I want to say. And like Enrique said, we'll put out more info later, and they can get it from you. And I think people will know how to reach us. And we have our own pages, and we'll put out the info and all that. But I just can't thank you enough, and thank everybody that was part of this. This was kind of like the East LA opening that we had, a year and a half ago for the book, but even more special, because this is for the families. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. All right, you guys. Well, thank you all here that joined us to speak. And then, of course, the families, the viewers, everybody who will watch this, and everybody who wants to support. We love you guys. We will be here with the family of Ernest Duenes Jr. It's Angelversary is actually this weekend as well. So we'll be joining on such a great family. So we'll be back next week. Thank you guys again, and you guys have a good night, okay?
Thank you, and thanks everybody.